Thanks for joining us for session 3 on the final day of ITPro Live 2020. I'm Justin Cupler, managing editor for ITPro.com, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. In today's panel, we'll discuss on-premises infrastructure, how it gets a bad rep, and how it's actually not that bad of a thing. I'm joined today by 4 knowledgeable panelists, 2 hardware vendors, and 2 customers. On the vendor side, we have James Petter, Vice President of EMA at Pure Storage, and Matt Harris, General Manager of Hybrid IT at HPE. On the customer side, we have Matt Cadieux, CIO of Aston Martin Red Bull Racing, and Chris Morgan, Infrastructure Architect at Admiral Group. Now, before we get into the panel discussion, let's first hear about each of our panelists. Let's learn more about them, their roles, and their companies. Let's go ahead and start with James.
Hi there, good afternoon, good morning. So James Petter, I run Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Pure Storage. And Pure Storage is a company that essentially builds flash-based products to allow customers to store, manage, analyze, and correlate data. So I've been here for 6 years and looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Matt Harris.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Harris. I run our hybrid IT business in the UK and I for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Those that don't know Hewlett-Packard Enterprise or HPE, we are the edge to cloud platform as a service company. I've been in the organization for 15 years and look forward to the opportunity of speaking to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt Cadieux.
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt, and I run IT here at Aston Martin Red Bull Racing. And our job is to provide the business with the tools needed to design, manufacture race F1 cars and to have optimal infrastructure that allows user experience and capability to be optimized.
Excellent. And last but not least, Christopher Morgan.
Afternoon, I'm Chris Morgan, and I'm the infrastructure architect for the Admiral Group. And I'm responsible for designing our on-premise data centers and infrastructure solutions to allow us to serve our customers at the rate we need to.
Perfect. Thank you again so much, guys, for joining us. Let's go ahead and kick off the questions. So our first question is going to be directed at our vendors. Let's go ahead and start with you, James. On-premises infrastructure is sometimes unfairly looked down upon as legacy technology, but it still has a vital role to fulfill alongside the cloud. Are you still seeing your customers deploying on-premise hardware in interesting and innovating ways? I'm sorry, James, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Clearly, the answer is yes. We still absolutely see customers deploying on-premise hardware, but we kind of just need to look at it in the context that cloud first isn't necessarily the automatic answer anymore. IT's evolved, to use a kind of cloud-best strategy, and there are 2 elements really that customers are looking for. They're looking for choice, and they're looking for flexibility. From a choice perspective, they want to choose the best, architecture based on their business outcomes rather than being constrained by their IT infrastructure. And flexibility, business objectives keep changing, and organizations need to have freedom to adjust where necessary. So, those 2 elements are really, really important. We see a lot of customers, particularly in the finance, insurance, healthcare industry, wanting to keep their applications on-prem for the very purpose that data is gold within their organization. So I think it's absolutely still one of the drivers we see in the market, but it's about choice and it's about flexibility.
Excellent. And Matt Harris, how about you? Do you see any innovative new ways customers are using on-prem tech?
Yeah, I do, and I agree with a lot of what James said. And I think the key statement that you made was, the word was vital. If you look at Gartner, they predict that 70 to 80% of enterprise applications and workloads sit outside of hyperscale cloud. And there's a variety of reasons around that. Is it hard to migrate? Are there security concerns? But for a lot of businesses, again, to James's point, a lot of those applications or the data is the very lifeblood of the company. And quite frankly, some companies, not just around regulation, want to be in control of that. We've seen customers doubling down over the last few years on a cloud-first approach, similar to James. Has it given all businesses the outcome they expected? It's definitely given them business benefit in areas. A one-size-fits-all strategy isn't necessarily the right answer. And I think what we're seeing now is a new trend, and that's customers who care far more about the experience rather than the location. They care about the right platform for the right outcome. They have all the same expectations around right cost to serve, heavily focused on automation. But now we're seeing customers looking at that experience from both a technical level and a commercial one. So heavily investing in simplification and automation and portability, and a lot of really interesting things coming out of the container market and community, but also looking at the right commercial consumption model as well. It's a big decision in terms of really understanding the right experience you're trying to achieve for your business or for your customers. So at the enterprise level, I really think this new trend around a hybrid approach, the right experience is a good one. And that doesn't even touch upon the great opportunity that we see at the edge, almost in a distributed data center or at the racetrack, as an example. And again, that's going to have a huge amount of on-premise requirements. So it certainly isn't a dirty word.
Excellent. Very good points. Now we're going to move on to a couple questions one question for the two customers online here. Let's start with Chris Morgan on this one. What role does on-prem play in your IT strategy?
So it plays a very important role for us. Whilst Admiral has aspirations to be a cloud-first company, our on-premise data centers still play a critical role in our operations. Many core business and analytical processes run in our local environments, and it's also along with the majority of our back office support platforms. So I believe that we should utilize the best technology platform for any given solution and not fall into the trap of using a given technology just because it's flavor of the month and it's what company X is doing. Typically during the inception phase of a given project, rather than be bullish and state that everything must reside in public cloud and go down the whole cloud first mandate, we'll ask the question instead of why not cloud? Sometimes the best fit will indeed be to onboard it into one of our public cloud infrastructures, and sometimes we'll decide a better fit would be to use one of our on-premise data centers. Common reasons, I suppose, for the latter, if we were deciding an application might be better on-prem, typically revolves around latency and performance constraints, along with cost and considerations around data locality.
Excellent. Matt C., same question to you. What role does on-prem play in your IT strategy?
Okay, so we're a hybrid shop, and we take cloud versus on-prem on a case-by-case basis. And ultimately, we need to provide our business with the right digital tools to maximize our business and track performance. We need to be agile. We're a very fast-moving company. We need to keep up with the pace of the business. And we also need to be cost-effective. And we actually have new regulations where we have cost caps being introduced into the sport. So we, case by case, say, given the business problem or need, is on-premise better or is cloud better? And we actually have quite a large on-premise estate. And some of the reasons for that are the need to do computing on the edge. So we have a lot of data coming in. We need to make very rapid, near real-time decisions. And the compute infrastructure needs to be local. So at the racetrack, we have local resources. We also have a lot of very special machines here in our factory in the UK, so things like dynos or wind tunnels that have a lot of special instrumentation where you need local resource. So we have quite a few examples where just to meet business needs, technical needs, on-prem makes sense. Financially, we also have many cases where we have very steady and predictable workloads. And they're sizing to the peak, where we always hit the peak. In general, on-prem is more financially viable than cloud. And so we look at all these considerations on a project-by-project, case-by-case basis.
Excellent, makes sense. Okay, the next question is going to be to everybody. I'll run down the list for each person on this question. Let's start with you, Matt Harris. What are some of the things that on-prem is better suited for than cloud, aside from things like meeting compliance requirements, of course?
I mean, that's a difficult one to answer, and actually, what Matt and Chris has just shared, almost going through that methodology on a case-by-case basis. I think sometimes organizations can miss. It's not just about an infrastructure decision, but actually it is one that you need to look at almost the legacy debt that you may have built up as an end user, considering a decision, processes, management frameworks, policies, which therefore can impact the overall experience. For me, you could start saying, well, is this particular workload suited better for this particular organization? And it would be unfair for me to comment because everyone has that a unique perspective on that. I think 3 principles I would say around on-premise infrastructure. One is customers want a quick return and a quality experience, and they want to build simple building blocks and with simplification that they can execute efficiently and effectively. And I think that's why you're seeing such a big increase in the hyperconverged category of the data center, that very scalable, simple way to drop in new stacks for customers. I think the second principle, customers will invest in operational saving benefit. So big focus on integration into software and infrastructure stacks and how they consume those, because if you can provide operational savings, particularly in the current climate where I don't think any market or any public sector entity is immune to what's happening with COVID, that's really important. And if you look at operational savings and the likes of some of the AI tools that now exist for operations, HP's version of that is InfoSight. It really is lowering the operational overhead significantly for customers, and it's such a consideration for an on-premise choice. And then finally, I think the final principle is customers investing on-prem for planning for the future, or planning for future problems. And that could be, gosh, I've got a real complex hybrid estate. Both Matt and Chris talked about their hybrid strategies moving forward and decision points. That becomes much more complex to manage. So how do I do that across multiple ways of consuming technology? How do I get some consistency there? Or how do I capitalize on new market opportunity? Matt's in the business here of winning races and accelerating performance. And actually, if he can go and do some analytics at the track side, which gives him a competitive advantage, he'll do that. We've published a deal that we closed with Zenuity, which is a joint venture between Volvo and Veoneer, around how they can develop the next generation of autonomous vehicles using high performance compute, using AI and analytics, but doing that on a consumption model, because it's a big investment in a very competitive market, and they only can afford to do that on a pay-per-use basis. So rather than specific use cases, I think there's those principles which are really key.
Very great points. James, do you have anything to add with what Matt said?
So I mean, I would broadly agree with Matt. I think what we've seen over the last few months with COVID is really that we've seen a lot of customers wanting to apply certain principles when they're buying tech. And those principles really are, make it simple. If you have any complexity in your environment and you find yourself having to deal with that when you're having to deal remotely, that causes immense issues. So we've actually found that a lot of the remote installs that we've been doing and doing a mode of video have meant that customers have actually wanted to keep it on-prem because they can get their person on site. They can then install it, deal with it, and make all the configuration changes that are required. The other factor we're seeing, and I would agree with what Chris said, just around, there are certain facets you need with on-prem. You've got to make sure that latency is managed. You can't necessarily, it's a mathematical issue for everyone. If everyone put their data into the public cloud, you would never be able to get that data back. So you have to have data on-prem near to where you are located, or relatively near, so you can get the performance and the agility that you would be looking for. And then the final point I'd make is that I think the macroeconomics of on-prem versus public, I think there's definitely a debate to be had there. And we will maintain that it's not necessarily about what's more expensive. It's more about where should the application sit based on performance, technology requirements, along with a commercial wrapper around it. So.
Excellent points. Let's shift that question around over to the customer side, of course, starting with Matt C. So what are some things that you may notice that on-prem performs better or is better than cloud, with exception of course compliance?
Yeah. So I think on-prem, our business is all about performance. The car needs to be fast, but also our decision making, the ability to use analytics to make decisions around our race strategy, and to do so in near real time, really key. And in order to have the business or the performance that our engineers demand, the infrastructure needs to be local. And so there, real time, local computing on the edge is really key to us at the racetrack and here in the factory. And yeah, I think the agility also, and our business is all about an engineering war. And we continuously develop the car, but we're also continuously developing our methods, our simulations, and our digital tools. And engineers in F1 are very impatient. They have an idea. They expect us to be able to react with the infrastructure they need to have a more advanced simulation or to take advantage of new technology. So being agile is really key, and having the assets on premise and having some software-defined features where things are composable, or it's easy to spin up resources in the private cloud. It gives us the tools needed to keep up with our engineering customers.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense in the situation you're in. And I want to, Chris, how about you? Do you see any areas where on-prem is just significantly better than cloud?
I suppose a lot of the areas we see the benefits in are generally around performance. We've got systems that are very transactional by their nature, and we move a lot of operations through them constantly 24/7. We don't have a sort of off period where we can catch up at any point. We need to be on top of things with data moving so fast. And I guess that's both from being more in control of our own destiny, maybe. With some of the technologies we're using on premise, we can be a bit more specific about what we're doing. We can tune it to exactly how we want it to work, rather than maybe what the industry in general is doing. And also it comes back to that latency thing as well. We have systems that are dependent on a result coming back to them very, very quickly, and we can't have another component that might be unknown to us in that chain that could slow things down. And it's about getting the data back to the customer as quick as we can, because if we start slowing down, data will come back to them from somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely, makes perfect sense. Okay, the next question, we're going to move back up to our two vendors, starting with you, Matt. Why are your customers choosing to continue investing in on-premise infrastructure?
Yeah, and I think I covered those three principles in the last question, in terms of really quick payback needed within immediate savings and those scalable building blocks, reduction in IT operation and operational saving as part of that, and then future problems or future opportunities to capitalize on that. So that's where I think the big trends and the principles are. I think the other ad, regardless of the technology decision that you need to make, this whole premise of consumption and the commercial considerations are so prevalent now, because I think if you think about the world of this cloud first world that we have been in for as an overarching strategy for the last number of years, that really came from probably large infrastructure vendors or the market not innovating fast enough. And therefore there's an opportunity for hyperscalers to say, hey, there's a different way of doing that. I think that's completely changed. There's been a huge amount of investment and innovation there is far more interoperability and openness, I think, in the ecosystem out there between different vendors, infrastructure vendors and software vendors, to deliver the right outcome for customers. But how you consume that becomes really important, because the overarching experience, the demands of our customers, of their internal customers and their customers, is one that we all have to respond to and react to. And therefore, paying for what you use, true as a service, is really, really prevalent now. And we're seeing, particularly in a post-COVID world, or a COVID world, depending on how you turn the second wave, that is a real market pull at the moment, where customers want to have speed, efficiency, simplicity, self-managing, and do that only what they truly pay for use.
Absolutely. James, same question to you. Do you see your customers choosing more and investing more in infrastructure on-prem, and why?
So, yeah, just one statement I'll make. The cloud is not purpose-built for enterprise applications, and enterprise infrastructure isn't as user-friendly as the cloud. And so the concept of hybrid is here today, and that's been accelerated over the last few months. So if you are to be successful, I use the analogy of digital Darwinism. And digital Darwinism for me is not about the big guys, the bigger you are, the more successful you be. It's more about how agile and how fast you can change to the environment around you that will mean you can be successful. So organizations who can actually move their data, dependent on speed, dependent on performance, dependent on cost, between a on-prem and a public environment, honestly, they will be successful. And from my company's perspective, we've seen a marked increase in service providers during this period, workloads going to service providers, and we've also seen a lot of activity around how we can simplify and drive down costs from an on-prem perspective. So that kind of gives you a feeling in terms of what our customers are doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're going to shift back over to our customers online. First question I'm going to give to Matt C. How do you see your on-prem estate evolving in the coming years?
Yeah, so I think we will continue to make investments in on-prem as well as public cloud. But some of the key areas, the key things for us are performance, giving engineers in our business the tools that allow them to do demanding simulations and run sophisticated machines. And the better we do at simulating, the better our car is, and the faster on the racetrack we are. So performance and infrastructure translates into improved business performance. Agility, our business is more or less a big evolving prototype, and we need to keep pace and be able to move quickly and provide engineers with new infrastructure, new resources. And whether we do that with a private cloud or public cloud, we need the agility and the tools to do that. And then bang for the buck. We all have tight budgets, and we need to make sure we're getting the most value for money. So, things like consumption models or not overpaying for things, sizing things correctly. We can do all of that with on-prem, just like we can with public cloud. So I think our investments in on-prem will continue to grow, and there's a lot of use cases. We know that's the sweet spot.
Excellent. Same to you, Chris.
I'm going to echo a lot of the same thoughts, I suppose. I don't believe that we'll ever be in a position where we have no on-premise footprint at all. Hybrid is here to stay, I believe. We'll keep seeing this hybrid scenario where public and private cloud will be working together, and where we can exploit the best attributes of both technologies depending on the specific use case. I believe we will still continue to exploit SaaS offerings more and more for some of our applications where there is a specific purpose-built solution out there for a given application. That might be an easy win potentially. Whilst utilizing the on-premise capabilities for those situations where we need to guarantee system performance or achieve maximum flexibility for data movement and security. It's an interesting one, actually, in the current climate. The COVID-19 crisis has highlighted that it's obviously not prudent to phase out an on-premise capability altogether, even if the balance of usage begins to tip towards the cloud. Whilst being a fantastic resource to take advantage of, we're sold that the public cloud is this infinitely scalable pool of resources, which you can do on demand whenever you need to. However, this argument starts to falter slightly in a situation where the entire world is also trying to do the same thing, and you end up in a situation where it's akin to waiting on servers being installed in your own data center. So I think the hybrid world will be here to stay.
Excellent points, Chris. And you speak to COVID, and actually leads me into my next question to our two vendors on the call. Has COVID had any impact on your customers' deployment of on-prem technology, and has that impact been a positive or a negative? Let's start with James.
So that's a very good question. So we've actually seen certainly our existing customers come to us and and forward purchase in order to prepare to support their remote workers, and we've seen that across multiple geographies across the world. So we've seen a definite acceleration around that. We've also seen an acceleration from the CIO making the decision to the CFO making more of a decision. And with respect to the guys on the phone, the customers, clearly you are our customers, but we have definitely seen a shift to, can I hold on to my cash? Given that the scenario is that there's less cash around. And then that cash is then moved to an OPEX rather than a CAPEX. That's kind of the general theme that we've seen. But, this is a unique environment. And I think this is actually something, the world has been defibrillated. And the acceleration of moving to cloud and more flexible architectures is here to stay. And this hybrid approach is absolutely the way forward, in my opinion.
Very great points, James. Matt Harris, how about you? How has COVID impacted your customers' deployment, and has that been positive or negative for you?
I mean, it's such an expansive question given the topic of COVID, and I don't think anyone has been affected. I think everyone's been affected from a business level, from a mental level, from a sanity level, certainly in my house. But yeah, first and foremost, I think when COVID hit, there was an immediate response, and I think how HPE saw that, it was around how do we help people. We saw immediate scaling requirements for workloads such as VDI, where organizations tried to scale how many people they had for working from home. I don't think anyone built a real business continuity strategy to assume 100% of their workers would be working from home 100% of the time. So that was an immediate reaction. I think we also saw a reaction, and really proud of what HPE did in terms of response to first responders and those conducting research. So we have a vast array of solutions that can help set up temporary hospitals, which we did in stadiums or shopping facilities, and played a role with our partners at the NHS Nightingale Centre as an example of that. So we saw that immediate response phase from customers. I think following on from that immediate response, what we've seen is clearly some economic uncertainty, longer decision-making cycles, but I think it's allowed every customer to really crystallize, and HP included, by the way, right, what is really important for our business moving forward? How important now is our digital transformation plan? How relevant do we need to be? What is my office strategy moving forward? What is my data center strategy, location strategy moving forward? I love James's phrase around the world being defibrillated. As part of that, it has really shocked and changed the whole makeup of how we operate and do business. But the principles don't go away. How do I give a great experience? How do I drive simplicity? And how do I reduce cost in terms of my operating model? How can I continue to be relevant and fit for purpose in the future? And the great news for all of us in the IT community is IT plays a significant role in that. We have to rethink IT and deployments and how we build and scale and strategize, but it can make such an important impact to our businesses, but most importantly, the human race, society. It will be high performance computers that do the number crunching on how to, solve COVID around treatment or cure. It's going to be the connectivity of people across the globe and coming together, and the sharing of data and information. And that's where I feel really humbled but inspired to be working in such an important industry.
Absolutely. Now, you touched on a really key word that leads me directly into my next question, and that's simplicity. Simplicity is an advantage that's frequently cited by fans of the cloud. Are there any ways on-prem can replace the simplicity We're going to give this to everybody, but I'm going to start with you, Matt, because you really touched on that. I want to see what you think about it.
Yeah, I think from simplicity, I think James coined it quite well earlier. You had hyperscale cloud providers not built for the enterprise, but then almost that consumer-like experience that you get from hyperscale clouds. Well, what does that actually mean for a customer? It means getting the right workload as efficiently and as effectively as physically possible to deliver the right outcome for customers. If you think about on-premise infrastructures now, and really where the vendors are going, they are modular by design. They're designed for outcomes, so they have the full infrastructure and hardware stack, heavily automated, heavily embedded in terms of that orchestration layer, and massive investment in the AI layer as well, where we are seeing infrastructure self-manage and self-heal itself. You rewind the clock 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that just really wasn't a concept. And if you think of the complexity that customers have today in managing their environments, having that done intuitively for them is really important. Making sure that there are high degrees of automation so customers can deploy within minutes and not months, really important. So it was great to hear Matt and Chris's views on their sentiment on hybrid and hybrid to be here to stay. But what that doesn't mean is we can build infrastructures and make infrastructure decisions in the way that we used to, almost in a pre-COVID world or even before that.
Very great point. I'm going to shift down to Matt C. With the same question, is there any way that you can see on-prem replicating the simplicity of the cloud that everyone is such a fan of?
Yeah, so I think on-prem, you can have a private cloud with a lot of the tooling and orchestration that you have in public cloud. So for example, we have a hyper-converged estate. We're able to spin up VMs and VDIs very quickly with very minimal effort. Things like backup and restore, there again, a few clicks, very simple to use, and it gives us the efficiency with on-prem private cloud as we could have with public cloud. And it also does so in a cost-effective manner with tools that we have ultimate control over.
Very great points. Chris Morgan, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to pretty much echo the same thoughts as Matt, really. We obviously have Admiral have a large on-premise footprint. We also have a footprint in most of the major cloud providers, and the cloud is always cited as the simple option. There's all this automation baked in. You can just point and click and something happens. But we can do that on-premise as well. We have APIs into most of our products now. We're seeing solutions from manufacturers coming more and more often with full APIs, fully documented plugins to various other infrastructure components that we have. So everything is ready to work together in a similar way you'd see in public cloud. And it's all about the automation. It's finding a way to simplify things and make it that same point and click or line of code and click that you'd get in public cloud, but on premise. I think we can achieve the same, if not very similar, with both.
Very good. And James, do you think that how do you see on-prem replicating that simplicity?
So I can only really talk from Pure's experience. We went at simplicity, took it to the extreme level. So we wanted our customers to be able to install, and have a system up and running within 30 minutes, which we can do. We wanted our customers to be able to manage their environment, their on-prem environment, from their phone or their iPad. They can do that. We wanted them to be able to upgrade it with no migration, no downtime. That's what we've allowed our customers to do. So we want to really attack the really difficult problems and put the control back into the customer's hands. Because with respect to technology, these gentlemen here, Matt and Chris, their jobs are cars and insurance, and that's where they want to put all of their efforts into. My job and Matt Harris's job is technology, so we need to just be able to deliver that to them in a way that is really simple, really easy to use, so they can actually go and focus on what they do as a business.
Very good. Now, we've touched a few times on some consumption-based models for on-prem infrastructure, but have these types of pricing models started to change the business attitudes toward IT investment, Matt Harris?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you'll continue to see vendors and solution providers continue to innovate here and invest here, and I think you'll continue to see the rapid increase of that as a decision for customers. Back to all the reasons we just talked about, we can get that simplicity and efficiency on premise, but sometimes technology innovation isn't enough. Commercial innovation has to also come to the forefront in terms of the business outcome that a customer is attempting to achieve. Clever leasing models and buyback models have been around for a long time, but true as a service, pay as you go, both I haven't got to make that capital outlay, but also I want this to be monitored and metered and managed for me is really, really important now. And I think particularly as customers in a economic downturn, which no doubt we're in, have to be much more cautious with their spend, or see market opportunity, what they want to invest in, but the investment rate to enter that market or to be competitive to that market is too heavy. Actually having a true as a service pay as you go based model is hugely important. We had our flagship event this week called HP Discover virtual event, and we announced some major announcements there around what we call Green Lake services, central managed cloud-based service on a number of workloads, be it machine learning as a service or data protection as a service or VDI as a service. And I just think you'll see HPE and others continue to invest there, and it play a critical role in future decision making for our customer base.
Very good. James, do you mirror that statement? Have anything to add to it?
I would broadly agree with Matt, because we've seen that trend happening. I mean, if you roll forward a few years, what are we going to see? We're probably going to see customers actually just buying an SLA, and with an SLA with a commercial wrapper around it that delivers everything they want. And there'll be penalties, and there'll be there'll clearly be that degree of flexibility that some customers don't have. So I do think that is definitely going to be a path that is going to be trodden well. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time before we can normalize to that model, because if you imagine where we've been CapEx, buy as you use, you buy a certain amount of technology and then you grow into it. And that's just been the way, and we've trained our customers very well to do that. Moving to an as a service where the asset is owned by the vendor, it's sold as a service, you buy it on the drip with an SLA. That's going to take a little bit of time to get used to, because there's depreciation, there's other factors to take into account which you can't change overnight. So it's a great time to be looking at it and discussing it, because I definitely think it's where the market is going.
Awesome. Now, we heard from the vendor side of that. Now, let's flip this over and check on the customer side. Have you seen this consumption-based model affect your business and how you run your IT and your on-prem? We'll start with Matt.
I think we're probably the outlier here, and we're regulated, or will be regulated with cost caps, and OpEx is actually more constrained than CapEx. So that's counter to the way the world is going. But I think some of the things that are in consumption models, like metering and allowing us to recharge to areas, and with regulations, we have what is F1 spend and excluded spend, and having the metering so we can apportion costs. So some of those tools are really critical to us. And then ultimately, the more financial means of buying capability we need, then the more possible it is to add capability over time as needs emerge. So I think more tools in the toolkit gives us more options.
Understand. Chris Morgan, how has the consumption-based pricing model affected your IT business?
It's from a business perspective, it's actually quite interesting. With the dawn, I suppose, of putting things into a public cloud that you don't necessarily manage yourself, and you're billed on an OpEx basis rather than us making large capital purchases all the time, it's almost shown the business that there is actually a cost to ongoing IT. So we've seen a lot of different areas in the business start becoming acutely aware of what they're using, and starting to have the conversations more often around, well, how much is this costing us? And we'll get into conversations about what's the hourly cost of this, or how much would another one of these cost us for an hour? And that's all obviously come from the public cloud way of working. But again, due to, I suppose, increased levels of automation and being able to get down to a much more granular level of management with a lot of the technologies we're using on premise these days, we're starting to be able to offer pricing models like that as well. So we can start not necessarily full charge back, but at least show back as to what different areas of the business are using. What might this business sector be costing us? What are they making us? What sorts of infrastructure are they using? And also, would this be more cost effective in public cloud or private cloud?
Very interesting. Okay, I have one final question. We're going to put this to the entire group. What does the future of on-premise technology look like for you? Let's go and start with you, Chris.
Okie dokie. So the future of our on-premise estate is going to be largely focused on achieving more with less, and seeking to reduce the physical footprint and numbers of our data centers, but without, the key bit is without sacrificing capability and performance. So I think further investment in all-flash technology, denser hypervisors, and various software-defined networking and security solutions will allow us to achieve goals in this area. And another potential area we intend to explore would be the ability to utilize burst capacity in public cloud rather than seeing it as a standard placement for a given application, whereas we can run the known sort of stable workloads on premise, but maybe utilize public cloud to cater for unknown spikes in usage or sudden performance requirements around certain batch processing. We've seen this a lot with VDI using the current. It's okay. We've seen this a lot with VDI during the COVID crisis, in that I imagine many companies are in a position where they've built some remote working solution, but as we mentioned earlier, the chances of that being set up to cater for a 100% usage with every single staff member remotely working is unlikely. So it's finding some happy medium where we cater for the base numbers and potentially burst to a public cloud solution.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Matt C., let's move on to you. What does the future of on-premise technology look like for you?
So here, I think similar to Chris, do more with less. We're a digital business. We continue to invest, but we also have more and more constraints. And but on-prem is still the sweet spot for performance capability reasons for many use cases, and we need to exploit that as technology continues to evolve. We also will be adopting more public cloud, and there will be more integration between the two. So figuring out how to manage this hybrid environment and managing the whole ecosystem is key. And then software-defined and just automation efficiency, and continuing to use the software-defined features in our private cloud and public cloud. We will be doing more and more to have more efficiency.
Very good. Now, moving up to our vendors, James, what does the future of on-premise technology look like for you?
So I think certainly on-premise has become more cloud-like over the last few years. So I don't think we should necessarily say on-prem is not a bad thing, because it has become cloud-like. And it's really down to the vendors to make sure that their architectures are simple, easy to use, can be consumed on-prem, but they can also allow customers to burst out into the public cloud without having to do any reconfiguration. Because that's historically been the issue, where you can put your data out there, but you're never quite sure when you bring it back, is it going to look the same? So I think the era of the cloud divide has come to an end. I think that it is absolutely a hybrid world that we're living in. And what that means is applications can be developed once and then deployed across whatever cloud you want to put it across, with a commercial offering that allows you to be able to budget in a better way. So I do think what we are going to see is increased agility, increased flexibility in a hybrid cloud environment.
Excellent. And Matt H., same to you.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no better testament than hearing from customers, right, in terms of what they believe the future will be. And I'm delighted to say that I think we're all in agreement that the future will be hybrid ecosystems, modular in deployment, simple and easy to install and configure, designed for outcomes, focused on the data and the insight of that data, highly interoperable between private and public clouds. And I agree with James that divide is now gone. True as a service, where you truly are paying for what you use and consuming. The responsibility is no longer on the IT professional to make sure they're getting the most out of that CapEx investment. Actually, it's down to the business unit of, oh, I'm only paying for what I use here, and so that switches that paradigm back. I also would add it'll have AI at the heart of it, AI operations at the heart of it, because the complexity and the amount of data and the compute processing power needed in the future, there'll be world problems that come up which humans just can't physically solve. And how you drive those operational overheads down to the lowest cost becomes really important. And that's it from an enterprise. I think the final point I would add in, what else will the future be? Well, reimagining what on-prem is at the edge. You look at the technology development with IoT or 5G as an example. I think we'll see our customers reimagine what on-premise means. Oil rigs, deep sea, the Arctic. We will be able to access places in the way we've never done before, remotely access and manage those environments in a way that we've never been able to do before. And there's going to be so much data and opportunity there that needs to be considered for future business. And again, that will not be done in a hyperscaler. So that's my view.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, all four of you, for a very insightful and engaging panel discussion. I learned a ton today, and I'm sure everyone else learned a ton today about why on-prem isn't necessarily a bad thing. So thanks again, all of you. And thanks to all of our viewers for tuning in on session 3 of our final day of ITPro Live. But stay tuned, because coming up next, we have Jeff Reedy with Scale Computing, who will discuss HCI. So hang on for that, and we'll see you then.